I made that my mission is I want not to just be a colorist in a technical sense of operating the software and coloring, but I want to be a colorist in the sense of I want the client to feel like they just had the best experience that they could possibly have for this part of the process. So everything we do, I'm always thinking about that as just the number one priority, especially because one, it's fulfilling, but two, it has to be a business. And for it to be repeatable, clients have to want to come back, and for them to want to come back, they have to leave feeling like, wow, I'm really glad that I went there. And I'm glad that I sat with Ryan or I sat with Michael, our other colorist, or Paul, our editor, and worked with them, and I only want to work with them.
Welcome to Color and Coffee, a podcast that focuses on the craft of color grading and the artist behind it. I'm your host, Jason Bodat, and each week we'll sit down with some of the most talented and creative colorists in the industry and have a casual chat from one colorist to another. We'll share their stories, their insights, their grading tips, and of course, their beverage of choice. Whether you're a seasoned colorist or just starting out in the industry, join us for some great color discussion. Strap in, grab your mug. You're listening to Color and Coffee. Welcome to this episode of Color and Coffee. I am thrilled to have both Becky and Ryan McNeal from RKM Studios. Welcome to the show, guys.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
So the first question that I have, and I ask this of every guest, is what are you guys drinking today?
Well, I've got my Starbucks peppermint mocha. I like the sugary coffee drinks, so just as much sugar as possible and a little bit of coffee.
And Becky?
And I have a flat white.
Excellent choice. So I'm drinking my vanilla latte in my Ember cup here. It also happens to be a Starbucks brew. And I'm going to be needing some new coffee recommendations because I've been drinking this exact brew for too long. So is that your normal drinks, guys? Or is that something special for today?
Yeah, this is what I drink every day. Becky always gets something new, but I just like peppermint mocha every day, all year long.
That's me too, man. I'm a creature of habit. I get the same drink every single time, which is why I'm trying to mix it up a little bit. Becky, what are some of your favorites?
I really like lavender coffees at like specialty coffee shops where they have that. It's usually my go-to if they offer it.
You know what? I'm going to ask you because you're also an LA native. What are some of your favorite coffee shops in LA for those that are in LA listening?
Just down the street from our office, we go to Priscilla's in Burbank all the time. They're great.
That's fantastic. I'm going to have to check that out. So I'm really excited you guys are the first dual interview on the show, and it's because I was super interested in your story. Ryan, I'm not going to spoil it, but I know that you were an assistant colorist at Company 3, and I'd love to hear more about how you guys started RKM Studios. Do you want to tell me a little bit more about that?
While I was working at Company 3 as an assistant, I was really interested in being a colorist, like most assistants are. And I started building my network of freelance clients, and I did freelance while I was at Company 3, and that sort of allowed me to feel confident to take the first steps of leaving Company 3 and just starting my own thing. That's how it started. I felt like my network was big enough that I could leave and like pay the bills and like make a career out of color. So I did that, and the first couple months I put a small office space on a credit card. I was fortunately in a car accident that didn't leave me totally wounded but gave me a nice settlement, so I was able to buy some equipment to get started. And then I thought I had a big enough network, and I really didn't. It was just as soon as I quit Company 3 and started off on my own, none of my clients had any work, and I like called them all and like, you got a commercial, you got anything? Oh, I'm not working on anything right now, buddy. So it took me probably like 4 or 5 months before things started picking up, and I made myself go into my office space every day at like 6 a.m. and I would apply to every like Craigslist, Mandy post, Facebook posts that I could find, anything related to color or visual effects, and I would take every job regardless of pay. And I just had the express goal of filling my schedule and building the network of clients and starting my network. And after about like 6 to 8 months of that, I was actually really busy and had nearly no time to do anything other than work. So I was doing 14 and 16-hour days like every day of the week. And that's about the time that I begged Becky to quit her job and join me in helping manage the business end of it.
So you spent, correct me if I'm mistaken, about 3 years at Company 3, and you've been on your own for 5 years now?
Yeah, a little over that. Yeah.
And Becky, what were you doing before Ryan begged you to come and manage?
So I was interested in a career working with animals. So I did a short stint as a Petco dog trainer, and then I was at a 24-hour emergency animal hospital for a year. There I was split between being a tech assistant and working front desk reception. And that's what I was doing at the time when Ryan wanted me to join RKM. I was planning on leaving that job anyway. I loved the animals and it was a great experience, but it is a very draining career. I could see that I was headed for burnout if I stayed in it. Ryan was like, why don't you just, you're planning on leaving anyway. Why don't you just quit now? We'll try running this together. He was like, it's okay if it doesn't work. You can always go back to job searching, but I really think it can work. And it did.
So let me ask you a question. And Ryan, try not to spoil it here. What was your honest feeling when he came to ask you and said, come work with me? Because I know a lot of people would be like, I don't want to work with my wife. I love her, but I don't necessarily want to work with her as a post producer. So that's an amazing request to have.
I was really open to it. Ryan and I have always been good creative partners in addition to life partners. We're also high school sweethearts, and we did a couple years long distance, and I think that really kind of solidified the communication. If you can make it through long distance, you can make it through a lot of things because it's all about communication. And I wasn't nervous about joining a business together. I knew that we had the foundation to work in a healthy way. What I've found with other couples in the industry, because we know a few, is they either work really well together or not at all. There's not a middle ground.
100%. That's so interesting. And part of the reason why I was immediately attracted to when you shared your story with me was the fact that you guys seemed to work so well together and you guys were just bouncing off each other's emails. And I could immediately feel what you're describing right now, that you guys do work really, really well together. Now, how would you describe your role at RKM? Would you say that you're a post producer? What is your official title?
I usually say post producer. It's kind of a combination of things: business owner, producer. I manage all the clients. I do all the invoicing and bookkeeping. So I'm also like our accountant. I wear a lot of hats and do a lot of things.
Ryan, you're a lucky guy, man. This is stuff that most colorists can't stand to do, and your wife's stepping up there.
I know, and I just turn the knobs until it looks good.
That's the colorist dream.
No, we both have to wear a lot of hats. She does the administrative stuff extremely well, and she does the client-facing stuff extremely well. And then it falls on me to do like the technical and the creatives. I'm our lead colorist, but I'm also our IT guy and like solutions engineer and color scientist, even though I'm not a color scientist.
Every studio or color house or even post-production facility needs to develop their own color science, their own essentially what they're going to be offering their clients. So I totally understand that. Even if you aren't officially a color scientist, you have to decide, what are we going to be using? What are we going to be offering our clients? Even if you're taking an off-the-shelf solution and customizing it for your own uses. So I completely understand that. So tell me a little bit about your facility, RKM Studios. I know you guys are located in Los Angeles. Tell me a bit about some of the projects you work on. I know we're currently still in a strike right now, but on the norm, assuming that we weren't in a strike, what do you guys specialize in?
We work on a wide gamut of different types of projects. I like to say if you can visually see the content, we can color it. Just about everything. Most of our work right now is long-form documentary because we are in a strike. That's one type of content that happens to be thriving. I think everyone sort of pivoted into doc. It's got maybe more like creative integrity than reality TV. So this time around, I think a lot of the filmmakers are real keen on making documentaries. But we've been moving more and more into narrative, and I'd say like usually before the strike, narrative's a good like 40% of what we do, either short films or independent features. And then the other 60% is pretty even commercials and music videos. I kind of came up doing mostly music videos, and I've definitely gotten my fair share of music videos out. So I'm like less and less keen to take those on. It's a lot of high stress, quick turnaround, high expectations. Creatively, music videos are a really fun type of project to work on when you're just doing the art part of it, but everything that comes with it, the labels, the artist, the stress can kind of kill the joy sometimes.
I completely understand that. They're great when you're coming up, especially when you want to experiment with stuff. But when you're running a business trying to pay the bills and have something consistent, they can be a strain. Now, what was it like transferring over from running freelance to what you guys are now? You guys have other employees. You guys are a boutique post-production facility. How was that transition? Because you guys are in a unique position that a lot of people aren't, where they offer themselves as a boutique facility, but you guys actually are. And I think that is really unique in the fact that you guys are thriving. Ryan, I've watched you since I discovered you on Lift Gamma Gain. It's been honestly really fun to watch you progress. I guess I've been watching you the entire time you've had this facility. So it's really, really cool to slowly watch you progress from being freelance over to now you guys have, I think I saw you guys have an editor, you guys have a digital intermediate technician. What was that transition like? And what was some of the high points and some of the low points?
It's been a really enjoyable journey, also very challenging. I usually find enjoyment in challenge, and Becky does as well. We're both perfectionists. We tend to analyze and research, challenge ourselves to constantly improve, figure out new things that we're not doing currently. So that aspect of it's been really fun. I think going from freelance to being a boutique has been an evolution of like how you think about your career, and it's a less about you and it's a more about the team or what you're building. A lot of our journey, I think, has been discovering and learning the qualities of leadership and mentorship. In mentorship, something that I'm very focused on right now. So we have a second colorist, and we have our editor, and we have our DI technician, and then I have a couple other freelancers that we subcontract with sometimes. But all these people are sort of like in the realm of I mentor them and I teach as much as I can, and I also learn from them. And I think mentorship's something that probably used to be more strong in our industry and has like sort of waned because a lot of the positions have moved to freelance and gig models. There's not always great opportunity to work with another artist and learn from them. So in our business, that's sort of a key tenet that I've wanted to instill is a learning atmosphere, and an atmosphere where we are challenging ourselves to improve and find new ways to do new things with new tools.
I mean, you were an assistant colorist, so obviously everybody's really busy and you're coming in there and doing assistant colorist stuff, but you were at least under a bunch of very, very talented colorists there. And then to move over into freelance where you have so much less contact with people, it's very jarring. And to be passing that on and to essentially prioritize mentorship is an amazing thing to hear. And I hope more facility owners prioritize that as well. That's an important thing to me. That's why I enjoy teaching, is to try and pass the knowledge on. It's not a black art. It's just something that's hard to find great information about.
I think sometimes, especially established artists, can be afraid that teaching someone might introduce competition. I think it's more of a rising tide raises all ships. The better your team is, especially when you're talking about within a single company, it only benefits all parties for everyone at the company to be improving and reaching for the stars.
How do you guys pull in new clients? Would you say that it falls more on Ryan, or would you say that it falls more on you, or would you say it's sort of split equally?
I would say Ryan laid a really strong groundwork in his early days of freelancing with his clients and built a very loyal client base. For a long time now, we haven't really had to do any outreach because we get all of our work through referrals. During normal times, I get like 2 emails a day from people I have never heard of who are reaching out saying, hey, so-and-so told me that they worked with you guys and I'm interested in working with you too. So I think we've been really lucky in that, and we've been able to thrive on that kind of loyalty from our client base. A lot of, I'd say at least 60% of our projects are from returning clients who have worked with us before and they're bringing us something new. And then the other 40% is new clients that have been referred by somebody who has worked with us.
Now, this might seem like a little bit of a strange question, but I firmly believe that there is something that both of you guys are doing to establish that loyalty, because this is not necessarily normal. I can tell you that establishing the quote unquote Rolodex is what a lot of colorists can't stand to do. And the fact that you guys sort of have the Rolodex spinning naturally is such an amazing thing to hear. What if you had to put your finger down on one thing, and I'll ask this to each of you, that you guys think you do to establish loyalty within your clientele? What would you think that would be?
I think it would be that we're very client facing. I come from a background in retail and working at an animal hospital where clients may not be having their best day and you have to be there for them. It requires a lot of empathy and making sure you're using the right words and tone of voice and helping them through what they're going through. I think that applies to everything in life, especially when you're running a small company and your clientele are mostly independent filmmakers. They all care a lot about their projects. That's something that I always keep in mind from start to finish when they're working with us, is that even if it's a small budget or even if they didn't have the greatest lighting on set, something about this project's really important to them. We should treat it that way. I think, and I have heard from clients that that's one of the reasons that they come back, is they feel like they're treated with care and they're treated individually versus being treated as just like a number or just another project somewhere else.
Ryan, what do you think?
I think, well, it started at Company 3. Prior to working at Company 3, I don't think I yet appreciated the client experience part of the experience. I had done freelance before working there, and the way I worked was very individual, and then I would get notes from the clients, which I would usually be upset about. And then I would implement those notes begrudgingly. Early in my career, that's how I dealt with it. And then when I started at Company 3, I saw that in my mind, 60% of the perceived value of what they were getting there was the experience they had. And that started at the front door. It was the greeting they got from reception. It was the presentation of the space. It was the availability of dumb things, snacks, and coffee. It was the look of the rooms and the candor that the entire staff used in talking about the projects with the clients. And then, of course, the experience that the colorist provided in the room. And what surprised me is those colorists were more or less like, it was like going to the optician, like you're being tested for your eyesight, and you have a really kind, deep voiced or a fair voiced person leading you through some very technical things, but in a way that is calm, confident, and encouraging. I thought that was such a powerful tool, the psychology of working with people, that I hadn't even considered was part of the career of being a colorist until I saw it in person. And I realized I needed to grow a lot, and I needed to let go of whatever I thought was like my vision, or like this is art, so I need to convince the client that this art is good. I had all these like backwards notions, largely informed by going to art school, that I had to get rid of. And Company 3 opened up my eyes to that. And then when I started freelance again after Company 3, I made that my mission, is I want not to just be a colorist in a technical sense of operating the software and coloring, but I want to be a colorist in the sense of I want the client to feel like they just had the best experience that they could possibly have for this part of the process. So everything we do, I'm always thinking about that as just the number one priority, especially because one, it's fulfilling, but two, it has to be a business. And for it to be repeatable, clients have to want to come back, and for them to want to come back, they have to leave feeling like, wow, I'm really glad that I went there. And I'm glad that I sat with Ryan, or I sat with Michael, our other colorist, or Paul, our editor, and worked with them, and I only want to work with them.
That's such a valuable learning experience. And that you were able to go and get that experience at Company 3, and then not only like go through that experience, because a lot of people, whether it's at Company 3 or another post facility, go through that and see the client management experience, but openly reject it because it's too much, or it's too much money, or there's too much staff involved. But the fact that you wholeheartedly embraced it and saw the benefits of it and then took it to the next level with your own facility is really probably the biggest tip of this episode so far, is the fact that you've taken it and run with it. Obviously, Company 3 is one of the biggest post-production facilities in the world right now. How would you say that you have modified that structure a little bit to work with your boutique suite? Because obviously, you don't have the same staff, you don't have the same resources, but you've taken that mentality to heart. I'm interested to see how you have adapted that on a smaller scale.
From working at Company 3, I could see some ways to improve the color producing aspect of the job. And so a lot of Becky and I's early discussions when she joined was language and how to deal with difficult clients, because let's be honest, most clients can be a little bit difficult to very difficult. That doesn't make them unworthy of being a client. It just makes them a client. Most clients have some hangups, and so you have to figure out how to get through them. So Becky and I have developed kind of just like a working language of like how to deal with nearly every what we call red flag issue. We've become very good at spotting potential snags with communication or personality. Even in emails, usually the first email, both Becky and I can get an instant read on what sort of client they are and what sort of management tactics we'll need to use in order to make the project work. And that's also important because you have to have very transparent goals to be able to have effective negotiation. And I guess that I'm answering more for Becky in this, but that's one of the areas that I thought could be improved because not just Company 3, but other facilities that I've worked at and companies through the years, I think client services usually gets burned out because of the difficulty of clients. There's not always tools to handle every situation, and so a lot of it just becomes ad hoc, and you just kind of deal with it as it comes, and that can lead to non-productive communication, to put it lightly. And then in terms of, because we're a small team and we don't have the overhead or the facility power of larger post houses like Company 3 or like the Mill, ways that I make up for the lack of staff is investing in technology and researching just key tools that I can integrate into our workflow to eliminate man hours. And a lot of this is like things that can be automated or things that can be completely removed from traditional workflow or things that guard against human error. So you're spending less time re-rendering or redoing things. Or in the case of our internal workflow, we build everything to handle client notes. Client notes are a priority in the technical workflow. So we can handle changes, and as we know, edit lock doesn't really exist anymore.
What's the thing?
If it ever existed. So a lot of the workflow has been designed to accommodate what we know will happen, which is the edit will change, additional spots will be added, the client will change their mind about color after the session. You just have to accept that those things are going to happen and plan for them in a way that makes it expedient.
That's really a much more peaceful way, I think is the right word, than a lot of the other workflows and mentalities that I've heard before. What is one of your favorite examples of something that you've improved upon recently? I can tell you're already thinking of one based on your smile. That you've removed or improved upon?
I'm more and more inclined to use color management in my projects. I've always been very traditional in like wanting to manage it all myself with nodes and LUTs and color space transforms. And there was a day where I was like, man, I really wish there's clip nodes, there's group nodes, but I wish there was like another set of group nodes that I could have like groups within groups. And it occurred to me as I was like thinking about it, I was like, oh, that's basically what color management is. And what I really want is like larger groups that manage the color, just input and output color spaces. And then I want my groups to just purely be my look. And then going down that rabbit hole, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna like actually like try some color management projects again, because I had tried ACES back when it started becoming a thing, and it seemed like a lot of extra work for not much gain, especially on projects where like you just really don't need the giant pipeline for a small result. So this time around I looked into Resolve Color Management and tried it on some projects. I also started seeking out tools that are expressly built for HDR DaVinci Wide Gamut Intermediate, the working color space. And that, coupled with Resolve Color Management, has been really great for the workflow because I've eliminated a lot of the time that myself, our assistant, or the other colorist has spent looking through all the files, trying to figure out which cameras the files are, managing them in groups and using shared nodes and group nodes to try to like manage color while also maintaining our look. I think that's been the thing I've been the most excited about within the recent months.
You're singing my language, man. I recently switched over to DaVinci Wide Gamut, DaVinci Intermediate for not only my personal work, but all of my professional tool development tool, because I had the same issue of, I mean, ACES is great, but a lot of people were using RE log C, and then other people were doing Cineon, and it was, what do you do? And so I was also doing manual color management, and I was also using groups and then getting stuck with, well, where do I do my look now? It's so funny you mentioned that, because I was in the same problem. And then I think it was about a year ago, I started to mess around with RCM, and it just clicked for me. And all of a sudden it was like, this is what we needed. Okay, now I can just start going forward and focus much more on the creative with this technical loophole sort of solved for me. At least for right now. I'll reapproach it later with another issue. For right now, I'm very, very happy with Resolve Color Management and DaVinci Intermediate. So I'm happy to hear that you're loving it as well.
Yeah, I really do. I think for the most part, it solves more problems than it creates. It does create like a little snag in that it's visually harder when our assistant preps the projects for them to determine whether or not a file has been provided in the appropriate color space. Because the project is visibly linear and the clips are visibly linear, like you can import a Rec 709 VFX shot and it'll look similar to the camera source files because both are in Rec 709 now. It's just a little bit more organizational effort on the load in side just to make sure that all your color spaces are correct and that you're not receiving materials that are misinterpreted already.
Exactly. It's all about the workflow, and it seems like you've got it down between yourself and the rest of your team, which I think is super, super important. Becky, one of the things I wanted to ask you, because we've been in the technical realm, is what would you say is helpful on your side of the business that you guys have done for efficiency and making sure that people are coming back and people are, I mean, we already talked about loyalty, but people are enjoying the experience, and people, like we were talking with Ryan about, people, your clientele enjoying the process, even though they're all difficult in some different way because this is their baby, their project. They may have been working on this for 6 months or 2 years, and usually as artists, we're jumping in for it for a couple weeks or a couple months. And so I'm intrigued to hear about some of the things on your end of the business that you prioritize to make sure that they're feeling like that you're prioritizing their projects.
A lot of it comes down to communication. I'm big on communication. It's a theme with me. I do a lot of work up front when clients first start reaching out and before we color to kind of establish a rapport with them, ask them about the project, make sure they feel heard. I use that time to establish boundaries about what the color session is going to look like, how much time they get, what the approval process is going to be like so that there are no surprises later. And I find that prevents a lot of problems and also prevents existing problems from escalating. And I think it makes everyone feel more safe as well. Just psychologically, there's something about like knowing how things are going to go that makes the whole experience better, even if everything else is exactly the same. It makes you feel a little safer. So I do a lot of that work up front to make sure that everyone knows as much as possible that this is how it's going to be, this is what it's going to look like. We're excited to have you here. Then they come in, they do their session. I'll check in on sessions. I'll stop in and say hi, make sure that everything's going good. But for the most part, I trust Ryan and Michael to be leading the sessions. And then same afterward, I'll follow up and be like, hey, it was great having you in today. Looking forward to seeing you on the next one. Just those little personal touches to make sure that everyone feels, start to finish, like we care, because we do. And also that they're being heard, and that if there are any problems that come up, everyone's aware and we can talk about it and it's not like a huge dramatic thing.
There is so much to unpack right there. I think one of the things that I wanted to point out is the fact that you implied that they're going to be coming back to you. And I think that a lot of people don't build that into their language and communication. And I think that's really important. The fact that you're saying, we look forward to seeing you next time. I mean, that goes, and it should be obvious, but I think that is probably more lacking in the industry than we would assume. It's usually, here's your files, here's the bill, hope to see you back. And you're making an assumptive, we look forward to you coming back. And I think that leads into you having a lot of repeat customers. One of the other things that I thought was really interesting is you setting boundaries in the color session, because one of the biggest things that I and a lot of colorists have problems with is scope creep of the session pushing further and further and further. And I want to deal with beauty fixes and I want to deal with VFX. And oh, I forgot about this shot over here that's the worst shot on the whole feature that we didn't bring up top. And so what are some of the boundaries that you talk and share with clients? Because I think that some of the listeners could benefit from hearing the way that you prep people for success at the beginning, before the session even starts.
A large part of it is the way we structure our sessions. We operate based on a full day or a half day session, and those are 8-hour or 4-hour blocks of time. So I kind of build all of my language around the session time, and we treat it like an appointment, like a doctor's appointment or something. Like, you're there at a certain time, you have a set amount of time to be working with your artist. So I build that into the language a lot. A lot of our clients are independent, they're working on low budget things. Even if it's a low budget project or we're doing a discount for whatever reason, I'll still give them the amount of time that the project needs, but make it clear that because it's a discounted session, we can't go beyond the 4 hours, or we can't go late at night, or we can't do a weekend, or whatever it may be. I think the time boundary is kind of the most important one, because you can ask for stuff in the session that's like beauty work that we didn't discuss before, and if it fits into the time, I don't care. But if you're asking for things that are requiring us to go late into the evening, or it's like pushing into our other work, obviously that's an inconvenience, and it kind of, our other clients are paying for their time too, so it's disrespectful to them when we have things that push over. So a lot of it is the time related boundaries and less about the money or like how much the project costs, and more about just like keeping things contained and not letting them overflow all the time.
Yeah, making sure that they're in their corral and not going into another client's corral, which
Yes.
can cause issues. Ryan, how do you deal with some of that in the session where you have a client essentially pushing for things that, I know beauty work. I bring up beauty work because beauty work tends to start off as one shot and then all of a sudden there's 60 shots. And it's like, hey, this is a whole nother day of work. How do you deal with that in a client services appropriate fashion? So you're not just saying, no, we can't do this, but you're also making sure that you're going to be able to finish your day and get on to the next client without disrespecting either one of them.
I have like several behavioral techniques that I use like at the beginning of every session. I know that my default behavior is I just want to jump in. Like, I'm excited for the art part of it always, so I just want to start coloring away, listening to my music, making it awesome, building something. And I have to go against my disposition there at the beginning of the session and just like do the data, look at how many clips there are, understand that I have 4 hours and there's 300 clips. That's a scary amount of clips for, it's not like terribly scary for 4 hours, but it's definitely cause for alarm. That tells me that we're going to do basic look and get through the shots, primary corrections, probably not a lot of windows, probably not a lot of beauty work. Right away, I know the limitations of the session, and then I immediately discuss that with the client. I'm certain that they've already been pre-prepped by Becky, but if they haven't, I'm just going to let them know and just be like, okay, given that we only have 4 hours and there's 300 shots, just what we're going to be able to do. We're going to be able to do your really nice look. We're going to be able to get through all of the shots in that time, but we won't be able to do very detailed things. So save any of your detailed notes until the end, but let's make sure we got the overall broad strokes right first, and then we'll start going through with a fine-tooth comb with anything we can in that time. And then with regards to beauty work, that usually is the slippery slope, because it is usually one shot where they'll be like, oh, and they always say it's one shot, but they always mean one angle when they say that. They'll be like, oh yeah, it's just one shot of her. She's just got like, the makeup just was like smudgy on her like cheek or something. We just need to like get that like smoothed out. But initially I'll be like, oh, one shot. Yeah, that sounds great. And then you go to that shot, you do it, it works great. And then of course there's 20 more shots from that same angle that all have the same problem. And that first one worked because she didn't like do a lot of rotating her head and stuff. But then the next shots she's like moving like this, and it's like she's like trying to make the tracker like fall off.
Yeah, literally, it's like they're trying to make our job harder at that point. It's like, you could have told me this shot.
Yeah, I always joke in the session when that's happening. I'm like, just for the future, guys, when you're directing, make sure your actors stand absolutely still and don't move. And don't move the camera if you can, because that's a lot better for color. That usually gets a good laugh. So I think you have to communicate fast and early, because the danger of holding something in where you're like internally, this might take longer, but you're hoping you might be fast enough, is usually the route to pain, where you get to the end of the session and you still need more time. And if you had only said when they made that request that it's not possible, you would have been scot-free, but now it's your bad, so you feel like you should go over the time at your own cost. I think it really is about being honest with yourself and honest with the clients and transparent immediately, and not in a way that's combative. It's always word choice, tone of voice. I like to control my language so it always sounds like I'm on their side, where I say things like, I really want to do this because I think this is what the project needs, knowing that they also think that. And then say, however, or as it turns out, there's only a certain amount of time left in this session, so I think I'm realistically not going to be able to do this, rather than saying, no, that's not going to work. Because as soon as you give a very definitive no, it sets them up to close off and also to get defensive about their requests. So I think it's being honest and making sure that you're still on their side as you give parameters.
That's great, because I'm also the guy that's like, great, let's jump in. There's the pool. Here's my diving board. I'll be out in half an hour. And all of a sudden, your time for balancing and everything else is out the window. And so usually I also am trying to advise, let me see how this goes. But all of a sudden, that time sinks away, because as creative artists, it's really easy to get personally invested in it, but lose track of that workflow like you're talking about. And the fact that you need to get to the end of those 300 shots and get that basic important work so it all looks consistent done, even though they really want you to do those 20 beauty shots that take that extra time. So I think that's a really great piece of advice too, if you're like both of us and you really like to dive in as the artist, to go against your inner judgment and make sure that you are setting yourself up for success, like you described, yourself and your client essentially, and the project as a whole. I think that goes back to what you guys were saying in terms of the client experience. You want them to walk out of there not only feeling good, but walking away with a finished project. I think that's the most important thing. Nobody wants to leave a post facility with a half-finished project. Even if you like the guy you work with, you're probably not going to be feeling real good about the project anymore.
Especially because that builds the trust. When Becky says a job can be done in 4 hours, and it's done in 4 hours, and the client didn't expect that it could actually be done in 4 hours, they leave impressed instead of disappointed.
And to that note, I always try not to underestimate on projects, because I don't want anyone to feel rushed, either on the client side or the artist side. And I think that goes with what Ryan is saying, that you don't do your best work when you're rushed and you panic at the end. Nobody feels good about the session, and we're all about feeling good about the session. I'm usually pretty spot on. I've gotten really good at watching client review links and understanding how much time it's going to take my artists to do it. Every once in a while I'm wrong. Either it's way easier than I expected, or it's way more difficult than I expected. And in those scenarios, it's usually just a conversation, like Ryan's saying. As soon as you realize that it's going to be more than you thought, it's time to have that discussion then, in the moment, rather than putting it off until last minute when everyone's panicking.
I think it's more of, this is a freelance thing. I think you want to please your client, and an attempt to hold it inside and say, let me see if I can fix everything, and then I'm going to present them with a fully baked cake. I don't think it ever works out well when you try and do that. Maybe 10% of the time it works out well, but most of the time we end up coming out with a cake that's half baked and looks, well, like a very half baked cake. And nobody wants that. Even though we put the effort in, we might be nice, but it's just, you're not going to be happy with that final product, the artist and the client.
Exactly.
Yeah, that reminds me of one of our red flags is a client who we've never worked with before that says the words, "Oh, I trust you guys, just do whatever you think is right." If I've not worked with them and they're saying that, that's usually like I'm being set up to fail, because I'm just going to give them my personal taste. And because this is all art, it's all subjective. My personal taste probably isn't theirs. Maybe it is. Maybe that's why they're coming to me, is they like the work on our website. But more often than not, when we hear that phrase and then I work unsupervised with no input, they usually have pretty strong reactions negatively to the color and want to change a lot of things and are surprised at the style that was chosen.
Yeah, it's very hard working unsupervised. I work a lot unsupervised. I think it's probably more difficult than working supervised, because you are just flying by the seat of your pants and going based off your own feelings, and then hopefully the producers like it, and if not, well, I had no feedback to go based off of. One of the things I wanted to touch on is, you were talking about client notes, and you guys get a lot of them, I'm sure, and not to be offended by them, and how you shifted from being freelance and getting insulted by all of the client notes and why didn't you like this? I think that's a natural feeling for us to have as artists because, well, you should like this. Why not? How would you make a suggestion to other artists out there to make that same shift?
Uh, the easy thing to say is that you have to not take it personally and you have personally disconnect your value and how you value yourself from the work. You cannot think that receiving notes is somehow a diminishing, critique on you as an artist. Notes are just part of the process, and what you're being paid for is to do note. That's the job. The job is to do notes until they're happy or until they run out of money or time or whichever. Whichever comes first. The long answer and the disappointing answer to hear probably is that it's the 10,000 hours thing. I think this is something that comes with experience. When you've worked on a lot of jobs and a lot of projects and you've done the 10,000 hours of notes, you start getting to a point where a note's a note and you're just used to it. You get them all the time. And it's not a reflection on you failing. It is just a note. That being said, there are some notes that still get me today. But most of the time, especially reasonable notes, and again, they're paying for that service of hiring you to do work for their project and execute their vision. And their notes are their way of communicating that vision.
I think it's especially hard sometimes when as a colorist and a technical guy, it's hard sometimes to get a note that just doesn't click. It's like, that's not right, or that no longer matches, and to not get defensive about that and to go, that already perfectly matches, or those are exposed perfectly, that's the backward angle of that one, why do you want that? And to do what you're saying and to just approach it as that's a note, it's their vision, not my film, and to apply it and see what they like, and hopefully they don't come back and go back to version 1, which happens sometimes as well.
Some client notes, I think most of them, it's worth entertaining the note and trying it before you react. Hold back the emotional reaction, attempt the note, and more often than not, it does actually work, or there's a version of the note that works. And then some notes are just purely unreasonable. And that's totally fine to reject a note. You just have to do it in a language that, they're going to listen to your rejection. You can't be like, this is stupid, or I'm not even going to try this note because I know it's not going to work. When you start doing those things, it becomes an argument about the words you're saying instead of about the work. I think it's worth entertaining the notes. And one of the things that I espouse a lot is to our team is listen to what the clients want, not the words they're saying. Most of the time, clients don't have good language to describe in color terms or in editorial terms what they want, especially when they're independent or young in their career. All their words are wrong, but they've made something, and the fact that they've made something means they have some expertise at being able to tell their vision. And what you need to get to is what is their vision. And sometimes it's listening through the words to their intention.
You nailed it, man. It's trying to, half of our job is translators and trying to figure out what are you actually trying to communicate to me here, and not getting defensive of that and nitpicking of their words.
Yeah, I once had a client who was the whole session, he kept being like, can we crush the blacks? I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, not afraid of contrast. Here we go. Crush the blacks a little bit. Oh, really crush the blacks. Oh, okay, even more. Wow, he's crazy. I'm crushing the blacks even more. And then he's like, no, really crush them. I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't think this is a viewable image. And then I'm crushing anymore. And he's like, no, the opposite of what you're doing. And I'm like, oh, okay. And I lift the blacks, and he's like, yes, like that. And I'm like, oh, okay. Just so you know, that's lift the blacks, not crush the blacks. Crush the blacks is make it darker. He's like, oh, I thought crush the blacks is get rid of them.
It's the filmmaking terminology. I when you go on set and you talk about lift and tilt and pan, and it's really funny if you can easily mistake those. And I think it's the same thing in color. And if you don't, we're specialists. And for people that don't know our nomenclature, our language, it can be both overwhelming and confusing. And people want to speak our language. And so to come in there and go, I want to crush the blacks, I want to bring down the highlights, I want to clip them a little bit. and they may not even understand what they're saying. And we take them literally like they've been speaking it with a PhD and go, why aren't you
Yep.
doing what I want you to do? And it's like, let's just speak heart to heart here. What do you want it to look like? What do you want it to feel like?
One of my psychological approaches to dealing with that is the layout of my room. I purposely have the client sit in front of me, and they're in their field of vision, the only thing they can see is the image on the client reference monitor. I prefer that setup because it keeps them in the mindset of analyzing the image and talking in terms of image design instead of the technicalities. And I find when, especially DPs, when they sit, with me or like, and they can see all of the meters and they can see all the buttons and knobs, they tend to point to things and start giving more technical and minutia and detail oriented notes that aren't always helpful because, again, what they're trying to achieve might be best achieved through other means than what they're saying.
Yeah, I completely get that. I've had mainly people that have gotten into Resolve, and Resolve there's a free version of Resolve now. So a lot of people, I think, feel that once they can download a piece of software, all of a sudden they want to talk in terms of the software. Go to the Hue V curves, use lift gamma gain. But the whole reason of artists coming to both of you and coming to your color suite is for your expertise, not just for your DaVinci Resolve setup. Otherwise, they would just rent the suite and do it themselves.
There have been a couple sessions where like that's on the tip of my tongue.
I think we've all been there, man.
But I hold back.
That's the line I like to use, and I have to literally like tie down my tongue is, do you want to drive or you want me to drive? The back seat's there.
I can think of one time in my career where that actually did happen in the session where the director was micromanaging and micromanaging and micromanaging. And at one point I just like kind of snapped. I rolled away from the desk very dramatically and turned to him and was like, if you want an editor to sit here and just like do your precise exact like notes, you or assistant editor could do that. If you want a colorist and an artist to work with to like, help you create something, that's me. But if you want like someone to just like micromanage through the process, there's cheaper, better people out there for that.
It's funny, and I think it's purely due to the accessibility of the software and the price of our tools coming down, which has been a huge benefit for both of us. And basically, you guys have been able to start your studio. It's so much easier to create home suites. But if you were to take that mentality to almost any other art form, if you were to go to a sculpturist and be like, hey, I want to have a sculpture crafted, it would just be insane for me to go, can you use that tool and put this over there? It just is such a weird thing to think about. But when you're working with digital video, because we can all modify videos on our phone, and there's less of a restraint on, let me help you with that. And I think it's important and clearly a successful thing that you guys have going there, that you are offering the artist mentality. You're basically making sure that the technical end is handled on the back end, and you're basically offering the artist craft up front. You have your clients in front of you, and then just focusing on what's important.
I think as artists in general, like one of the things that we can trip up on is finding our job security in our equipment instead of the craft and the skill and the art part, because that's very amorphous, ambiguous, and difficult to, catch lightning in a bottle every time. But if you got a really good camera, or you have a sweet panel, or like the best reference monitor, it's easy to get caught up in the technical process as being the means to the ends, whereas really filmmaking is an art form and the audience experience is why we're all here. The more of us throughout the entire process that can put ourselves in the audience position and be like, is this cool? Is this moving? Do I emotionally feel invested in these characters? Or like, do I want to buy this product? Do I think this musician is the coolest thing? That's why we all do it, and it's easy to forget.
If I were to take you and put you on a desert island, you have to take all of your jobs with you, and you could bring one tool with you, what would that tool be?
For me right now, it would be Dehancer. That's been my film emulation plugin of choice. I've used all of them through the years, like back when it was just the LUTs floating around to like Film Convert for a while and Filmbox. I really like Filmbox, but the licensing stuff makes it difficult for a boutique studio because we have like 6 workstations, so it's just a lot of licenses. But Dehancer I love, and the tool is so powerful, and you can get such a variety of looks out of it that I think that would be like the one third-party tool in Resolve that right now I feel like I just have to have. But that'll probably in 3 years I'll probably have something else that I'm like, oh, this is the best thing.
That's fantastic. That's a unique one. I haven't had anybody say Dehancer yet. In Dehancer, is there a feature that you like the most that you just like, I am always turning this on?
The grain. I think if there was like if it was like you can only have one feature of Dehancer, the grain I think is the best part of the plugin. I think their grain it renders fast on like a robust computer, so it's real time. It looks really good. You've got plenty of sliders to dial it in along the shadows, midtones, and highlights. The highlight portion of the grain looks the most like film to me because in years past, back when we were probably all using like cine grain and doing like blending modes and stuff, it's very difficult to get overlay grain into highlights. And that was always like a dead giveaway for me of like, it's digital where they've added grain. But now with these plugins, this generative grain is really good. So that would be the one part of Dehancer that like I just have to have is the grain until someone comes out with something better.
I know it's constantly evolving. I'm a big fan of Dehancer. I haven't gone into it to the level that you have. I definitely have a license for it, and I've been experimenting a lot with it. Becky, what about you? I know it's going to be a different type of tools, but if I had to send you to a desert island with Ryan, of course, and you had to have one tool to continue doing your job, what would that tool be?
This might be a boring producer answer. I'm going to say the Notes app because I keep absolutely everything in there. If I do a phone call with a client, I will just like jot down like bullet points of what we talked about in there so that like, weeks later I can go back and be like, what did I tell them? I have a whole sheet in Notes that's just called copy pasta info. And it's information that I send to clients regularly, like our address, our prep guide instructions, how sessions work, little blurbs that I just copy and put into emails because I'm sending them so frequently. So yeah, I would say the Notes app, and that's probably really boring.
I don't actually think that's boring. I'm a huge Notes nerd. I've been doing like research on Evernote and Notes and Joplin and UpNote for I think I'm up to years now. And Notes is my newest thing because Apple has made it so powerful that it's just hard to resist. So I completely get that.
I know you can do checklists in there and like cross things off. You can do spreadsheet
scans now. There's so much stuff you can do in it. And it's free, assuming you have iCloud. So it's really hard to resist that. I totally get that. You think that'd be boring, but it's super not boring. Clearly, I run my own business. I just want to thank you both so much for coming on the show. This has been such a fun conversation, especially talking to both of you and being able to bounce off. And it's just been such a pleasure having both of you on the show to be able to talk about how, Ryan, you came up from Company 3, and Becky, how you joined him and how you've been able to run this boutique color facility. It's been such an interesting conversation to learn about how you've transitioned to essentially a full boutique facility in Los Angeles. So thank you so much for coming on the show and for your time today.
Thank you. This has been great.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
No problem. And for this episode of Color and Coffee, I'm Jason Bodak, and we'll see you guys on the next episode. And that's our show. Be sure to follow us on Instagram, YouTube, or your podcast app of choice. If you're using Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please leave us a review. It helps us quite a bit. If you are looking for DaVinci Resolve tools, please be sure to visit our sponsor, Pixel Tools. We'll see you guys in 2 weeks with another great interview. Happy grading.